Welcome to the Female Voice, the show that champions women in business and amazing female founders that are changing the game for the future of the UK. This week, I'm delighted to introduce Tamsin Broster. I met Tamsin about a year ago now at a women's networking event that Tamsin was running in Bristol, and hearing her speak at the end of the day and telling her story and her business journey really impacted me, and I really wanted to take the opportunity to invite Tamsin on because I think that her story will resonate with a lot of women that listen to our podcast. So on Tamsin's LinkedIn profile, she describes herself as a coach, mentor and queen of confidence. Having spoken to Tamsin a few times over the last few months, that really kind of exudes out of her. I've seen on LinkedIn in particular over the recent months a real strategic change in the posts that she's making. Bright, shiny, confident, beautiful woman. Her values, I think, really resonate as well with a lot of female business owners. So I think we should dive into a conversation talking about self-doubt, lack of confidence that really resonates with a lot of female founders. A lot of women that I speak to every day are kind of doubting themselves, going, well, I know how my business, I want it to look, but I don't think I'm good enough. I'm not confident enough. How do I ask those awkward questions? So Tamsin, if you'd like to share a little bit about yourself, your history and the work that you do with women.
Yeah, thank you. What a lovely intro. Thank you. I'm Tamsin. I run confidence programs for women in business and also women in corporate too, because there is such a, like you quite rightly described there, there is such a tendency for women to hold themselves back, to think they're not good enough. You know, people talking about imposter syndrome all the time, and whether you think that is real or not, it's actually what you're experiencing and feeling is real. And I think that really does show up, especially in business, when we are thinking about anything we are trying to do, when we're launching, when we're scaling, when we're growing, just everything, it leaks in. And you'll hear me talking a lot about body image and how that impacts us and our self-worth, because it is not an accident that women are expected to stay small and pretty and young, because what happens when we fall outside of that box, or we think we've fallen outside of that box, and we perceive ourselves to not be good enough, is that we hold back and we shy away. And actually the patriarchy loves that, because that keeps us out the way, that keeps more space for others to go and, you know, continue their dreams and pursue their stuff, because we're not upfront and, you know, being out there with our business. So I help women to dismantle whatever it might be that's holding them back. And I have a real mixture of clients that sometimes are holding them back because they think that they are too old, or they are not able to go out there and be that new business owner in front of all the people that they used to work for. And I have a MOD background, so I used to work with the military, and I know what it's like to go from a 20-year career, you know, in a senior leadership role, and then pop out the other side, you know, after a very interesting sort of burnout, and then declare that I am coaching and mentoring women. And it's hard using social media and all of that stuff. So I have clients that are sort of struggling with that visibility piece. They know they love their business. They really want to get out there, but using and marketing themselves on what we have access to, which is free platforms, websites, all of those things, can feel really confronting. And it brings up things that you didn't even know were there. And then on the flip side of it, I also have women who are new to leadership, or are quite new to business, but are finding that their body image, they feel really unconfident about their body size, their body shape. Maybe they've gained weight, maybe they've even lost weight. You know, I do speak to a lot of people who have lost weight and feel like really weird about their identity, and people's comments end up being about that, and actually what they're trying to do is get out there and talk about their business more, and they end up talking about their body the whole time. So there's a real mixture in there of people I help, but it all comes back to the same thing. All comes back down to confidence and self-worth, and just being able to be visible and feel safe to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the key takeaways from me when I heard one of your first speeches was, I mid-40s now, not as thin as I used to be by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a 6-year-old. My lifestyle is very different. And it is, when I first launched Female Founder, everyone was saying, right, you've got to be the face of the brand. You need to get out there. You need to make videos. You've got to do videos. You've got to be out there. You've got to be the face of the brand. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. People need to see who you are. And I was so terrified. Like, oh my God, I don't want people to see me. I don't like having a bad hair day, or I've got a spot the size of a planet, or it is the weight thing again. So I absolutely feel that. I feel that myself as a female business owner, as a woman in finance. And it's kind of, whilst it's not comfortable, it made me feel like, oh, actually, it's not just me. Like, I'm not the only person that feels that kind of inner ick about seeing myself on TV, on screens, in newspaper articles. And so, yeah, I really, really valued the speech that you gave.
Yeah, because and I know the talk that you're talking about, my story was about how I'd been in the MOD and I had put off going for promotion for quite a long time. And that promotion was worth £12,000 a year, which, might not seem a lot for some people, but that was just where I was at the time. And that was a significant, difference to my family. And I put it off for 3 years and I kept shoving it away. And so much of that was because of my identity, because I felt like I was not senior leadership material. I felt that I was too, I was a mum and I had just had my second, and I just felt really self-conscious. Like, I felt like everything was going to open up when I lost the weight, which is interesting because I'm so much further away from that size that I even was then when I thought I was too much. And I remember when I finally did get that promotion and I'd had my second child, and I thought, right, I need to, when I come back from maternity leave, I need to do two things. I need to come back and look like I haven't had a baby. That is my goal, right? So I spent the first year of his life going to slimming clubs, every week, trying to control my body so that when I went back to work, it didn't look like he existed. And at least there wouldn't be any sort of physical body. But of course, yes, I went back slimmer than I was when I had him, because I'd had a baby, but it was never enough. Like, it was just never enough. And I remember standing on that stage when it was a new team. They built this new leadership team, and it was me and two other guys. And I remember standing up there, and we had to go on stage and talk about how we were going to, change the face of logistics for helicopters and how we were going to support everybody. Of course, the audience is already annoyed because, one, you've got the job. Two, there's been job cuts to make your job happen. That was uncomfortable. And there were so many things going on. And I remember standing there and all I could think about was my stomach. I just could not get out of my head how my stomach wasn't flat. And would they notice, and what would they think of the dress I was wearing? And I was not thinking about what I was actually bringing to the table, which was 20 years of experience in MOD logistics. I had climbed my way, and I mean climbed, from the very first entry low level at 18. And at this point, I was 37. I had timed that. I had earned that space. I had done all the qualifications. I had a SIPS qualification, which I never talk about. I've got MSIPS. I never talk about it. And it's so interesting because that was part of the reason why I got the job, because lots of people don't do that qualification because they haven't got the time, they've got the money. And I did it. And I worked hard years and years in advance, not realizing how it was going to necessarily pay off. But in that moment, all I thought that defined me was the size of my body. And that sounds extreme, but I know I'm not alone, because that's why I'm in business. Because women feel like that. And even if I'd have got up there and I had lost weight, I probably, because I have done that before, I have swung between being, too much to getting to my ideal, what I, in quotes, ideal weight, but I still didn't feel enough. Because then I felt very visible, and then it was like, oh my God, you've made it. And I was like, I don't feel like I have, though. I feel like nothing has changed, and I feel like everyone's looking at me, and that doesn't feel safe either. So literally, I couldn't win. I couldn't win inside my own head, regardless of how people saw me, whether they saw that as a success or whether, it just didn't matter if I was the biggest person in the room or the smallest person in the room. Nothing seemed to matter. And then I realized it wasn't about that. It was about my self-worth. It was about internally knowing that I am safe in any size body, because bodies change.
Absolutely, yeah. How do you feel that obviously the women that you're working with, specifically women, how do you kind of take them on that journey? Like, is it just to kind of start off with a gentle conversation, take the time to understand like what their personal challenges are, how you can help to impact their own mindset and their mental shift, and then they can go off and be their best version of themselves in their own businesses?
So the process really is I have to understand where people are at and how they've got to where they are, and what that story is. So the first thing that I do with any client is really just to understand what's going on for them. Where is this showing up in their life? Because everybody is different. For some people, it will be showing up in their personal life more than work. They're actually fine going to work. They're fine putting themselves out there. But actually in their personal life, they don't feel very attractive. They don't feel attractive to the partner. They're not having intimacy, that kind of stuff. And for lots of the women that I'm working with at the moment, it's about visibility, getting on reels, being that, like you said, being the face of their brand is so triggering for them, because every time we like pick up our phone to like record and we see our face or we see our body and we hear our voice, even doing things like this. I was listening to somebody the other day talking about how she'd been on a podcast, and she's like, and they recorded it, and I watched it and I just got head in my hands, and I thought, oh, isn't that so sad, you know? And so I really want to unpack where it's showing up, because once I know where it's showing up, I can start working through how we get that. Because the difference is, with the way I work, is I don't want to just unpack it for you and then you go off out into the world. What I actually do in like Known or Rise, like Known is my program where I help business owners get through and get visible and get seen. And what we do is we unpack this stuff in the background, but we also take the action together during that time, because I've seen so many women who do the work, they do the stuff, and then they go off out into the world, and actually they still need some help kind of putting themselves out there, thinking about going on podcasts, speaking gigs. What is it they're not giving themselves permission to do and be seen doing? So we do it at the same time, because then it's like creates that momentum and that traction. So when they do pop out the other side, they're not just kind of left going, well, now what do I do? How do I get visible? How do I get seen? So we do a bit both. And different people need different things. So some people don't necessarily need the body image side of work. They might need more of an understanding of them being seen by people they know in their life. It might be that they have left a big company, or they're in the process of leaving a company, and actually those people are watching what they're doing, and that can be really confronting. So we work through that. So it's lots of different things, but yeah, basically that first session is the gate opener, basically to understanding where somebody is and what they are struggling with most. And 9 times out of 10, there is always body image stuff in there for sure. And most of the time, not all of the time, it is weight gain people are struggling with most. But that doesn't mean people don't struggle when they lose weight. That identity shift, that I don't deserve to be in a thinner body, I don't deserve to be taking up space in terms of beauty and value, can really come out as well. So it's what those stories are. And then working through them as they come up. And I love that, because not everything comes out in the first session. There are things that, you remove one layer. You know what it's like with money stories. It's very similar to that kind of work. You remove one, it's like new level, new devil. You get another thing that's in the way of you getting out there, being visible. So we just keep peeling back the layers and keep moving forward.
Yeah, obviously we both work predominantly with women. I have in the past been unpicked quite severely online for things that I've posted and shared. Do you think that it is predominantly women that can be unkind to each other, or do you think there's kind of you said earlier the patriarchy, they're very good at not wanting women to be seen and to be heard? Not all men, absolutely, I would always say not all men, but some do. I have had experiences of both sides, so men and women being equally unkind. What's your experience of that? Do you feel like it can be mainly women that tend to rip each other apart, or do you think there's kind of some, I wouldn't say bias, but maybe intimidation from the men as well online?
That is such an interesting question. Do you know what? This is just my personal view, okay? The patriarchy, isn't a gender. It is a system of oppression that is affecting us all. So men are equally harmed by the patriarchy. and the patriarchal society that we live in. Right. But women adopt it too. We reinforce it through the way that we talk to other women, the way that we talk to ourselves, the things that we will accept. It isn't an accident that women, and we saw this in COVID, are still doing the majority of the unpaid labour in the household. We saw that glaringly obvious divide in 2020 right through to 2022. And I think that shocked quite a lot of people, but I think there are so many ways that we are still continuing to buy into that narrative and continuing to uphold patriarchal values. In our families, you will see it throughout, like different ways in the way our families operate. Maybe our parents, our grandparents, our friends are doing it, and it's upheld in so many different ways. Diet culture and the beauty culture is part of that equation. The gender pay gap, the money divide. There are so many things that are at play that are all feeding off the same system. What I tend to see, it depends on what we're talking about. I think I'm seeing at the moment there is a trend for women to be calling each other out online. Oh, she's saying this and I don't believe that that's true, blah, blah, blah. And, getting a bit catty. And actually, what I think is wasting their precious real estate, because I call it your social media real estate. That is your place where you hang out. And unless you've got a phenomenal email list, which obviously we should all be building, don't want any business coming for me. You are wasting that time talking about other people, and actually all that you're doing is showing that you are somebody who talks about other people, and that's not really a fun place to be. So we're seeing this trend, and I've seen lots of copying going on and people calling that out, and rightly calling that out, and that is part of the same system. We're upholding this idea that if one woman believes this or is having this wealth or having that it means something about us, and actually it doesn't. A woman having wealth doesn't take it away from other people, and that's what this comes down to. This comes down to our potential for earning. That is why in my story I was talking about how much money I lost over that 3 years, not because money's the only thing that I lost, but because it's so important, because women having money gives us choices, gives us power, helps us to get out of situations that are not comfortable if we find ourselves in those situations. And I think women forget that this is actually down to, when you're building a business, you're not doing it so that you can continue working for free and doing unpaid labor. You are doing it because you want to create something for yourself that gives you choice, whatever that might be. And so I do see a lot of women, kind of that calling out online, not being particularly nice to each other. But in terms of like body image, I get called out like that a lot on Instagram. If you're using social media and you're not on LinkedIn, it's a much kinder place to be, because Instagram, I can post a video that's like talking about accepting ourselves and loving our bodies a bit more, and I don't know, whatever, all these different things that I talk about. And someone would literally, it will usually be a man with like a 12345 username, eat a salad, and I'm like, okay.
Yes.
Get to the gym. I'm like, okay, thank you for that lovely advice, because I'm in a plus size body, so I am an easy target for these people, and that's fine. It's water off a duck's back. I'm not interested, because and this is what I'm trying to help women to understand, is you don't have to get to a place where you don't care what people think. You don't care what women think. You don't care what men think about you. You don't have to get to a place of that. I want you to get to a place where you don't care, because you're so grounded and anchored into yourself that's why you don't care. Because there's a couple of different ways. When people say, oh, I don't care what people think, I'm like, yeah, but do you not care in sort of like a sod it, I don't care what they think, angry mode? Or are you saying that because you're so deeply happy and contented with where you are? Because there's a real difference, and your life and your enjoyment of being online and being okay with people saying things to you will be very different depending on which one of those you sit into. And that's what I want to help women do, is anchor into themselves. Like, I don't want you I don't have to prove to people that I work out, that I eat well, because people will always look at my body and assume that I don't. And that's fine. Like, that's okay. But we get into this space where we want to prove that we're not, neglecting ourselves. We don't need to get into that energy. We don't need to prove anything to anybody. We don't need to prove to people that our business is doing well, or we just need to prove to ourselves that we're heading in the right direction and feel okay with that. That's it. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I went off on a tangent there.
No, that's exactly, that's a perfect, honest, genuine answer. I So what one of the examples I've got, so I was fortunate enough to be interviewed by the FT for a newspaper article, and completely unrelated to that article when it was posted. There was a series of comments actually on the FT website down below. People had taken the time to Google me, unearthed pictures of me that had been posted over the past 10 years in different things, and specifically picked out one photograph of a t-shirt I was wearing in a finance conference, and it said the future is equal. And I was like, well, that's not controversial, because equality for everybody, whether it's gender, race, religion, culture, belief, future is equal, should be equal for everybody. And they absolutely unpicked that one t-shirt choice. And I'm like, why have you taken the time to read? I mean, brilliant that you've taken the time to read the article, to highlight which is discussing the gender funding gap and everything we're trying to achieve with female founder. Brilliant. But then to take the time out of your day to Google me, to find a picture that was posted online years ago of me wearing this t-shirt in a finance conference. I'm like, why? What's the drive? What's the incentive to do that? And then to post comments saying, who does she think she is? Why can she get away with wearing a t-shirt like that? It's just a t-shirt at the end of the day.
And let me guess, was that mostly women?
It was a mixture. It was men. It was mostly men, to be fair.
It's so interesting. And I was listening to Jamila Jamil, because she's obviously an amazing advocate for women's rights and body image as well. She talks about a lot. But she was saying something yesterday that really resonated. She was like, and actually she was talking about something a bit more serious and a bit different, as in online trolling, but which I won't go into. But she was saying, like, we can only feel pity for these people, that they are willing to spend the time that it takes to, like you said, like, are you like, and she said that the only response is, are you okay? You can only feel pity for these people that they either have enough time in the day to do that, or like are willing to go to those lengths for what? Because it doesn't change anything. You still had that conversation. We're so threatened. Women and men are often threatened by women talking about money. This is not the kind of conversations that we went to a conference last week that was just all about wealth and all about money. And I messaged Kylie, the host who runs it, and said, like, you know, we would have been burned for those conversations at some point in time, because they're not allowed. And I still think that today. I still think that it is interesting that there is only one of those types of conferences where we're talking about property, wealth, power, long-term wealth. That is the only room I have ever heard of that discusses it to that length, to that degree, unapologetically. And I think that's interesting that that's the case. You know, that we're still so threatened by women having money, and it's not just men that are threatened by that.
Absolutely. And I looked at the conference, obviously there was such a room full of inspiring women who have achieved great wealth, whether it's physical money wealth, kind of personal wealth, joy, everything that wealth and brings them, and the mindset. But say it wasn't, I think, I'm sure someone said it was 1975 that a woman could open a bank account on her own. That's in my husband's lifetime.
Yeah, exactly.
That's in this generation.
And we carry that generationally. We carry that we are not trusted. And I always link the money conversation to the food and body conversation. As whilst I don't necessarily go into the relationship we have with food so much anymore, it's more about the body image stuff. I can't not talk about it, because it is a way of controlling us. If we are taught to control our bodies, and the only way we can really do that is through tiring ourselves out by over-exercising or restricting food, then we are easily controllable. And it's the same with money. If you don't have access to money, you are controllable. You know, my nan, everyone talks about how marriages used to last, so long. It's like, she couldn't leave. She didn't even have her own passport. She didn't have her own bank account. She could never have opened any of her bills in her lifetime. She left that all to the men. When my granddad died, she passed that on to my dad. When my dad passed away, she passed it on to my brother, who's not even 50. He was in his 40s, and he suddenly found himself having to financially care for and manage the estate and the day to day, everything from paying the gardener to everything. She couldn't do any of it. She did not handle her money. She didn't know how much she had. She didn't know where it was. She just trusted that the men in her life were taking care of it. Now, lucky for her, my granddad, my dad, and my brother are very honest men and very incredible men. Like, but that could be a very different story. And who would have
Absolutely.
suffered through that? Me, because that is my generation, and that the house that she's left us would not have happened. That would have gone to my brother had she have had dishonest men in her life, and they weren't. She's very, very lucky, but I just think that is so interesting that she was just so terrified of having money. And
Yeah.
again, it's being terrified of having power and all of those things. It's so linked to how we treat our bodies, how we talk about ourselves. We don't hear men walking into rooms going, "Oh gosh, don't mind my hair, I look a right state today." Like, never.
No,
And yet
no.
we can't even pay each other a compliment without going, "Oh, this I got it out of a bin." Like, don't even look at me. We just can't do it. And bodies and our appearance is so by design. And so many people don't believe me when I say that. I'm like, I'm not saying you can't care about how you look. Clearly, I am sitting here. I have makeup on. I have my nails done, although they do need doing again. I care about how I look, as in I fall in line with a lot of the beauty standards that are pushed upon us because I actually like them and I enjoy them. However, I recognize what's underneath that. It's that aligning ourselves with how we look, and it is by design, because when we're busy with that, we are not questioning anything else.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I'd be really, I mean, I don't have the answer, but I'd be really interested if anyone does have the answer out there that wants to message in how the shift happened from women not being able to manage the household budgets and being able to be in control of the money to now statistically women are better at handling household budgets, which means they're safer to lend to. They return 3 times higher revenue pound for pound in female led businesses. When that shift happened, how we went from not being able to have control of any money to
Yeah.
being better at controlling money and managing cash flows and statistically being able to return the higher revenues on money that we're given. Well, it'd be really interesting to understand how and when that shift happened.
Yeah, it would be really interesting but I think we've always been that way. I think we just haven't been able to be given that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me
Thank you
too.
so much. Um, if anybody wants to listen in, please like, share, and subscribe the podcast. Thank you, Tamsin, so much for your time. It
Thank you for
was
having
really,
me.
really great. And thank you, everybody, for listening.